It's worth spending a few minutes on these two examples, this one and that one, because they illustrate programming patterns that are very typical of Python, and they're very common, and also they are somewhat different from other languages. So in many other programming languages, if you want to go over a collection, for instance, this one extension, and let's copy it over here, well, the only option that you have is to go over the range of this index and then access the elements of extension one by one by indexing into it. And this clearly works and gives you access to all the elements one by one, but there is a quicker way of doing this in Python, as we have seen, and that was the very first example I showed you. And with a Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Sailor list, we can do the same here, and just write for E in extension. Since that list is now defined, I don't need to define it again. Print E, okay? Now, there may be cases where you actually want to use the index explicitly. You see the difference is that this formulation is using the index explicitly, while if you're doing this, you're just accessing the elements one by one. But sometimes it's important to know what the position of an element is, and a typical case is when you have to coordinate that with the elements of another list. So here, suppose you want to print out an extension together with the type of content that it's used for, then obviously when you print out an extension, you have to know where it is in the list so that you can go and pick out the corresponding content. And this obliges you essentially to use the index I, or at least this is one way of doing it. You see here I varies from 0 to 4, and besides printing the extension, we also print files contains and the corresponding element of the other list. So this is fairly intuitive, but in fact, as I've shown you just here below, Python gives you an option to actually bypass using the index, even in this case, by using this zip. Now you might have asked yourself what this zip is, and I hope you looked it up in the documentation. And if you didn't, another way to find out is actually to try it. And if you do something like this, you find out that this is another of those funny lazy things that don't actually produce any value immediately. That's good. It means it's not using up your memory. If you force its conversion to a list and you print out the content, that's counter brackets, here we are, you see that the zip actually is constructing a list where each element of the list is a tuple of one element from the extension list and one element from the content list. So when you loop for CA in zip extension content, what's actually happening is that C becomes doc, A becomes text the first time around, and that's what you print. You print doc files contain text. And then the second time around, C becomes JPEG, and A becomes images, and so on and so forth. So this is a way of pairing the elements of the list extension, the list content, without going through the index. And Python does it for you by this trick, essentially. Again, this is memory efficient because this is computed lazily. In the end, which one of these two things you are going to use depends on convenience and on the task that you're trying to accomplish. They are roughly equivalent. There may be situations where, for some reason, one is preferable to the other. This one is seen as more Pythonic. This one is far more general in that it's applicable in almost any programming language. And therefore, I think it's very important to know this one and to understand how it works. But obviously, since you're programming Python, sometimes you may want to use this one because it's very convenient as well. It is in the end a matter of taste, and with time you become more familiar with these constructs, and you will know instinctively which one makes sense in the concrete situation in which you are.